practice was fun. Even with Windy City, it was fun. With me personally, I just want to play basketball.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. Today we're going to be looking back at the 10 games across the NBA. On Wednesday we're going to be previewing Thursday's 3 games, talking about news across the league as well. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
All right, let's get to it indeed. We will start where we always do on these shows with
Monstrous Line of the Night.
Who else was it going to be? Karl-Anthony Towns of the Minnesota Timberwolves. An absolutely huge performance from Towns. 35 and 12 against the Charlotte Hornets. 4 triples, 3 assists, 2 steals, and 6 blocks. He was 13 of 20 from the field and 5 of 7 from the line. I said it maybe a day or two ago that his ranking for this season was going to depend on what happened with his blocks. If he was, because the last 2 weeks he'd been averaging like half a block a game. If he got it back to 1.5 a game, then he'd be a top 5 guy. Otherwise, he wouldn't be a top 10 player. Well, this was certainly an explosion here. His blocks are up over this season versus last season, 1.8 versus 1.4, and he's in that same range where he's been all the last 3 seasons. The 7th ranked player, the 8th ranked player, and once again the 7th ranked player. But there's huge scope for him to improve from here because he's shooting only 49% from the field. He's been a 54% guy each of the last 3 seasons. So there's massive room to improve there. Plus, those blocks are already up. And if all that comes together, then we should see him push into that top 5, top 4. The numbers had been a little bit down, but this block explosion today, and without general soreness around, I think we're going to see some pretty good numbers from Towns. He's got a usage of 29% over the last 7 games, up from the 23% he had last season. So really ramping it up. What we sort of hoped what would happen once Butler got traded is starting to happen, and those blocks, if they can keep up, it's going to be really, really hard to keep him out of that top 5 for fantasy. So a big game from Karl-Anthony Towns.
Waiver Wire Line of the Night.
This is also the Deep Leaguer of the Night. It's Tomas Satoransky of the Washington Wizards. You know that I like Tomas Satoransky. Imagine being a coach and thinking that Ty Lawson would be a better option. Shout out Scott Brooks. Satoransky assumed the point guard role. He'd been starting anyway at small forward, but with John Wall out due to the birth of his child, Satoransky took the point guard role over and did exactly what he did when he had that role last season. 14, 4 and 7, 2 threes, 2 steals, and a block. 5 of 7 shooting. He is an excellent fantasy option when he's given this sort of a role, but in that play off the ball, sit in the corner, do nothing role that he was playing at small forward, he's not worth it in majority of leagues, but he's still rostered in only 3% of Yahoo leagues, which is ludicrously low. He needs to be rostered in way more than that. He is the 221st ranked player over the course of the season, but top 200 over the last month, top 180 over the last couple of weeks as those minutes start to push up. That means he is a 16-team league guy and could be pushing into 14-team territory. But when Wall comes back, he just isn't going to handle the ball as much, and those numbers aren't going to be as sexy as we saw today. But a really strong player, significantly better than Kelly Oubre, significantly better than Austin Rivers, in my opinion, and a guy that if he went to a team who's struggling for a point guard, the Orlando Magic, the Chicago Bulls, even at the moment the New Orleans Pelicans, he would be a perfect point guard for those teams to go and do what he needs to do. A really underrated player who, every time he gets opportunity, seems to show just how good he actually can be. Guys, with Christmas around the corner, you should be thinking about presents for all of your family, and if you're not, get your ass into gear. And a great present for those of you in the colder climates is Action Heat. Today's episode is sponsored by Action Heat, of course, and Action Heat makes the world's best battery-heated clothing. Heat on demand at the touch of a button. You can control your own environment with Action Heat. The clothing is engineered safely and to efficiently deliver heat, much like the car seat warmers in a car, which is obviously really comfortable when sitting in one of those cars. They can reach temperatures up to 135 degrees and are powered by rechargeable 5-volt lithium-ion batteries that last up to 12 hours on each charge, and you can even charge them while wearing them by using your phone or another electronic device. This is perfect for people who like their winter activities, going out into the snow. Action Heat provides heated jackets, socks, gloves, hats, and even undergarments like their heated base layer shirts and Long Johns. So if you get a little bit cold around the nether regions, Action Heat has the product for you. So we've got a special deal just for our listeners to save 20% off your entire order. Go to actionheat.com/lockedon to check out everything Action Heat has to offer. That's actionheat.com/lockedon, or use the coupon code LOCKEDON at checkout to save 20%. Stay toasty warm while you enjoy all your outdoor activities this winter with Action Heat, and we thank them for sponsoring this podcast. All right, let's go on to the next award.
Young Gun of the Night.
It goes to Lonzo Ball of the Los Angeles Lakers. Lonzo was pretty instrumental in his victory for the Lakers over the Spurs. He played 40 minutes, 14 points, 4 rebounds, 9 assists, and 2 steals with 3 triples. The shooting, it's still not great, but 5 of 12 is not horrible. 1 of 2 from the lines, obviously not ideal. But these are the sort of lines that Lonzo was putting up last season. And after the game, Luke Walton said something that many people have been calling for. Maybe I haven't been quite as vocal about this, but many people have been calling for, is split up the Lonzo and LeBron minutes. And that's what happened in this game, I guess, with Brandon Ingram out. They really had to make that choice, but Lonzo was able to thrive. We saw those assists, which have been really lagging this season. Bump back up to those numbers we saw last season. Lonzo is outside the top 120 for this season, so there's no doubt that it's been a little bit of a struggle for him to adjust, coming off the knee injury and all that sort of a thing, but I do think he's going to be a top 100 player this season, and he should be a must-roster guy. The Lakers have not missed a beat without Rajon Rondo around, because Rondo's just not that good. Now, I do fear for how Walton's going to use Rondo when he comes back and whether that cuts into Lonzo's playing time, but hopefully we're getting a little bit more confidence back with Walton in Lonzo and understanding how to utilize him best with this squad, and that's going to lead to consistent minutes and consistent production from Lonzo Ball moving forward. But he is your young gun of the night, a guy who really does have great fantasy potential. It's just not an ideal situation. And the other thing for him at the moment, his blocks are non-existent. He averaged 0.8 blocks per game last season. He's at 0.3, and that doesn't seem like much, but it is a massive amount when talking fantasy. It's almost a complete standard score worth of difference in terms of overall impact on his rank, and that can be 30, 40 spots in the rankings, and that would make him a whole lot more palatable if he was getting that 0.8 blocks per game, which he isn't at the moment. So I think that is going to switch around at some point. The steals have already started to come back, 2.8 steals over the last 4 games. We need those blocks, and we need those assist numbers to jump back up. But the assist numbers, really, they aren't going to fully realize themselves until he does play a lot more of his minutes away from LeBron James. The dud of the night goes to DeAndre Jordan in what is one of the weirdest stat lines of the season for DeAndre. Only 24 minutes as the Mavericks got their asses kicked by the New Orleans Pelicans. 2 points on 1 of 2 shooting. Didn't go to the foul line, had 8 rebounds and no other stats. Just a really disastrous game for the Mavericks. They'd been rolling, and they just got killed by the Pelicans in this one. So Rick Carlisle, much like Greg Popovich, when things are out of hand, guys just get pulled in, and they don't come back in at all, really. He is the 50th ranked player over the course of this season, but we've seen him reverting back to some of those Clippers numbers. The blocks, they're just not coming back, guys. I don't think we're getting them back. He averaged 0.9 blocks per game last season, and at the start of the season, they started to tick up. But over the last month, he's at 0.7, so somehow he's gotten worse from that disappointing season in blocks last season. He is still pretty high on the field goal percentage, but not the 70+% guy he was as a member of the Clippers. He's at 62 this season, under 60 over the last month. The rebounds are nice. The improvement in free throws is really good, but his value has tanked because those blocks and because that field goal percentage has dropped down. And they were the two real big things that carried his overall value. It was a bit of a turd in today's game from Jordan, and that's obviously not the expectation for him moving forward to be as bad as what he was in this one. But it is worth mentioning just some of those declines that are happening, and it is, I guess, decently to be expected given the age that Jordan is, the decline that does happen with that lack of athleticism for a guy that does or did rely so much on his athleticism that it is starting to fade away at the moment. Let's look at the plus-minus GOATs. The highest net rating was Tyson Chandler of the Lakers, a plus 141.8 net rating. That is an absolute monster number. While the worst net rating went to Ish Smith of the Detroit Pistons, negative 111.9. Ish suffered an injury as well, which let's talk about now, actually. A few injuries to talk about. Jeremy Lin didn't last very long before suffering a back injury. He wasn't able to return with that back problem. So if he is out, then that opens up some minutes, perhaps for Jalen Adams, but some more value for guys like Kent Bazemore and DeAndre Bembry, who both played very, very well for the Hawks today, and they are 12-team options, no doubt. Anthony Davis hurt his ankle. He went to the locker room, he returned and played out the game, so that's good. We'll, of course, just keep an eye on that. Brandon Ingram also suffered an ankle sprain, but he wasn't able to return. He is really borderline as a 10-team league guy at this point. I think in 10-teamers, if he is out for any length of time, much like the artist formerly known as Torian Prince, if he's out for 3 or 4 weeks, then in a 10-team league, given his lack of real production, then I think you can consider moving on. I wouldn't in most cases, and of course, if you've got an IR spot, you just hold him there. And the last one, Ish Smith suffered a groin injury. He doesn't think it's too bad. He's going to have an MRI on Thursday, but you'd have to think he's going to miss at least some time with this groin injury. That means you're going to get more Jose Calderon, more of the Shark Bruce Brown as well, and maybe a little bit more Langston Galloway, but nothing really that's going to have too much of an impact on most 12-team leagues, and really not much in even 14 or 16-team leagues where Smith was actually providing some value some of the time. Let's move on now and talk about these games in some extra detail. There are 10 of them for us to get to in today's show. So the first one we get to is a pretty clear smashing by the Golden State Warriors over the Cleveland Cavaliers, 129-105. Steph Curry was unbelievable, 42, 9, and 7 with 9 triples in 34 minutes, while Durant had 25, 10, and 9 with 2 blocks. Strong games from Durant, but it's pretty clear that you can see that his value is nowhere near what it was when Curry was out. That was as plain as day that was going to be the case, and these numbers are still great, but they're not 40% usage, they're not 40 points per game, and he's just settling back down. But you couldn't really sell him high because everyone knew that, and plus, who were you getting? Davis or Harden? Like, that were your only options to get back, realistically. No Draymond Green, so another nice game from Eunice Jerebko, 11, 4, and 5. Of course, his value will dissipate once Draymond returns. While Klay Thompson struggled, his usage has also dipped with Steph back, unsurprising. I don't think he's a top 50 player. I don't think he's a top 60 player. If you can get a player back in that range, I would do it in a trade, but I think your window is going to slam shut pretty quickly. 16, 4, and 2 for Klay Thompson. Iguodala started, and he just does so little in those minutes that he gets. So Kevon Looney, good minutes again, 25 minutes as a starter, 8 and 6 with 3 assists and a block for Kevon. He is a 12-team option, at least at this point, until we get to January when Cousins should be back, and that's going to have somewhat of an impact on Kevon. For the Cavs, what do you do with Larry Nance, man? 24 minutes, 11 and 8, a steal on the block. Now, this was a game that Tristan Thompson, it was always going to be a bit of a struggle for him against the Warriors. He only played 30 minutes in this game, so Nance got extra minutes. Still, the majority of Nance's minutes came at center, so is his value just going to be entirely dependent on how many minutes Tristan Thompson plays? Of course, Nance is a significantly larger part of the future in Cleveland than what Thompson is, but that doesn't mean that Larry Drew understands that or wants to utilize that. Thompson had been getting 38, 39 minutes a night, while Nance was getting 15 or 16 minutes. So if Nance is a 25-minute-a-night guy, then he's a 12-team league guy. If he's a 20-minute-a-night guy, he's a 14 to 16. But there's no discernible pattern. There's no way of understanding... Well, there's no way of understanding what should happen. There's no way of understanding what actually will happen with the way Larry Nance runs that. Chetty Osman had a good game, 16 points with 2 steals. He is up and down. We're well aware of that. And Rocket Rodney Hood got hot. He had 15 points in the first half and then had no more. 16 shots, 1 assist, no rebounds, and 1 steal. I think he's more of a 14-team league guy, while Alec Burks showed the consistency issues, or the reason why he's not a must-add or must-roster 12-team league guy. 9 points in 23 minutes on 2 of 10 shooting. Some strong games to start his Cleveland tenure, but he's just not going to play enough or be reliable enough as a 12-team league guy. Colin Sexton had 21 points. He did it efficiently, but no defensive numbers, only 3 assists and 2 rebounds. Just continues to be an underwhelming fantasy guy. You'll hear later on I talk about the top 20 fantasy rookies, and despite him playing 30-plus minutes and being an 18-per-game scorer, he is down outside the top 10 of fantasy rookies over the last 2 weeks. This game, obviously nice scoring, but getting that sort of scoring can be tough. So that's why he is a 12-team league guy, but just not as good as what the scoring column may suggest that he is in terms of his overall production. Guys, you need to, if you have a company and you are looking for a new way to reach customers, you should be asking me if you can get a spot on this podcast advertising your company. Podcast listeners are 60% more likely to interact with the sponsors they hear on their podcast, like the fine folks at Action Heat. Our demographic is 98% male, more educated and higher earning than your traditional media audiences. Have your company sponsor this podcast by emailing me at redrockfantasybasketball@gmail.com. All right, let's go on to the next game now. We look at the Denver Nuggets and the Orlando Magic. A good victory for the Nuggets on the road. No Gaz Harris.
Nice, Gary!
So the Blue Arrow, Jamal Murray, played 46 minutes. He said he was dealing with a calf issue as well. 31, 4 and 8, strong from him. While Juancho Hernan-Gomez continues to be very impressive. 14, 4 and 2 for Juancho in 37 minutes. Farton Will Barton is due back any day or any week now. Isaiah Thomas is supposed to return at some point in December. So Juancho is going to lose some value. I think they need to start him over Barton, to be honest, not necessarily play him 36 or 32 minutes. I think they need to keep him in that starting lineup as they continue to roll. I worry about the impact that Barton and Thomas are going to have on this team with their, let's just say, not ideal shot selection. So there's a big challenge there ahead, and Juancho's a guy who's just been thriving. He's having 12-team league value. I just don't think it's going to last. Well, Nikola Jokic, 12 points, 8 rebounds, 13 assists. He just can't get his shots to fall so far this season. When they do, when he goes on that patented January, February, March run, I wouldn't be stunned if he is the number one fantasy player over that time, because he's doing so much at a high level and the shots just aren't falling. And when they do, it is going to be over. Torrey Craig started for Gaz Harris. He did nothing as usual. Monty Morris had 13 points and Paul Millsap 18 and 2. And those defensive numbers, which were carrying his high rank, have fallen off. Well, not fallen off completely, but they were invisible in this one. Onto the Magic, a good bounce back from Evan Fournier, 26, 8 and 4 with 6 triples, while Nick Vucevic kept it rolling, 24, 15 and 4. But a shout out to Mo Bamba.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
He'd been really struggling, but played some solid minutes next to Vooch, 11 and 6. He hit 3 triples and he had a steal and a block. Now, he has not been providing anywhere near 12-team league value, and I don't think he's going to be unleashed at really any point this season unless there's a Vooch injury, which of course is a giant possibility. But it was good to see him do something because he had been struggling over the last few weeks. Asa Gordon had 19, 6 and 5, while Terry Ross continued his hot streak, scoring 17 points in 32 minutes. Johnny Isaac, the defense there again, a 1-1, 11 points, 4 rebounds. I still believe in him as a 12-team league guy. I don't like that he only played 25 minutes in this game, especially when John Simmons he's terrible. He's just not good at all, and he sucks pretty much every game that he's out there. Isaac needs to start. He needs to play 30 minutes a night, and hopefully Steve Clifford comes to that conclusion very soon before I write it to him in a very sternly worded email. Let's go on to the next game. We're looking at the Washington Wizards versus the Atlanta Hawks. Johnny Wall out, as I said, for the birth of his child. Brad Beal, 36, 6 and 9 in the 131-117 victory, while Kelly Oubre, this is as Oubre as it gets, 19 points on 5 of 10 shooting, a weird 3-steal game. His last game he had 3 blocks. He's very fluky with the defensive stats. He gets literally no assists at all. He only played 25 minutes, even with Wall out. I don't buy him as a 12-team league guy. I've said it so many times. Now, this Thomas Bryant performance, this is sexy. A 1-1 for Thomas Bryant, 16 and 9 in 21 minutes. Now, it's the first time he's gone over 20 minutes as a starter, and it coincided with Wall's absence. So is him playing better, him getting more shot attempts, and looking better without Wall a coincidence? Or is it something of him just gaining more confidence? He's a name to watch, because like Larry Nance, if he gets 25 minutes, then he is in that top 100 discussion potentially as a shot-blocking, 3-point shooting, high-rebounding, decent efficiency scoring big man. I don't think it's going to happen, but he's just a name to watch. 2 stinkers in a row for Markieff Morris, 12 points in 23 minutes, still a must-roster guy. Austin Rivers started for Wall and had 9, 7 and 7, and that's great. But when Wall comes back, he'll go back to being even more irrelevant than he was today. 20 and 11 for Otto Porter with 5 assists, really stepped it up in Wall's absence. On to the Hawks. Formerly was out, so Kent Bazemore started. Go back and grab your Bazemores for as long as Prince is out. 22, 2 and 6, 4 steals, a block and 2 triples, and he will likely fade off once formally returns. While the Baptist John Collins, he's just quietly doing what we hoped he would do. 26 and 14. No other numbers, which is a bit disappointing, but otherwise some strong performances there. While Vince Carter was forced into action with the Wizard Amari Spellman out. 13 and 4 with 3 triples, a steal and a block, a real throwback Vince game. Let's talk about some of the other guys who replaced some of Prince's minutes. DeAndre Bembry had 8, 3 and 6 with 4 steals. He's like a Thomas Satoransky type of a player, contributions right across the board. He's a must-roster 14-team league player, and he's a fringy type of 12-team league guy, more dependent on what you need, while Kevin Huerter had 8, 3 and 4 in 27 minutes. Now, I would take Huerter over Bembry, even if it means Bembry outproduces him the next couple of weeks, because I feel confident in Huerter just maintaining a starting role, maintaining a 30-minute-a-night sort of a role in this team, and pushing up as the usage increases as the year goes on. And that's why I look at him as a more preferential add over, say, someone like Bembry. It was a real stinker from Trae Young. 14 points, 2 rebounds, 5 assists, but just can't hit the shots. But Again, if you drafted him, you were punting field goals. So you're happy with 14 points. You're happy with 5 assists. You're happy with 2 steals. You want more threes, though. We need him to be a 2.5 threes a game guy, a 17-point guy, and 8 assists, which would be excellent. He's just a long way away from it. There are a lot of struggles for Trae Young at the moment. And I know that Kyle McEwen, shout out to Kyle, who had courtside tickets for Bucks Pistons today and was out there shouting out nicknames from this podcast at the players, who I'm sure Bruce Brown was thoroughly confused at being called the Shark. He was pretty down on Trae coming into this season, and Young is struggling. He's putting up some numbers, but he is definitely struggling to put up the sort of impact that the Hawks fans would have hoped for. The next game we look at, the Oklahoma City Thunder with the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets had a big lead until Paul George went absolutely bananas in the fourth quarter. Ended up 114-112, Oklahoma City getting the victory. George had 47 points with 15 rebounds, 6 triples and 4 assists. Unbelievable performance from Georgie. He's been really strong. He had dipped a little bit with Westbrook back, but to Russ's credit, he deferred to Paul George in this game when George was getting hot, and he absolutely dominated. Russ still had a triple-double, 21, 15, and 17. Big numbers from both those guys, but you'll be stunned to know that Westbrook, again, can't hit free throws. He is literally a punt free throw guy now, and that's as weird as it gets. Jeremy Grant, again, no upside, but value. 5-5 with a steal and 3 blocks. He's fine as a 12-teamer. He is the younger Taj Gibson. While Nerlens Noel brought the defense once more, a steal and a block in only 14 minutes. He has use in that sort of a scenario as a defensive stats streamer. Steve-O Adams, he's just pissing on your free throw percentage, really. 15-8, 2 steals and a block, but 1 of 6 from the line. One of the worst guys in terms of impact on free throw percentage, while MC Hamidou Diallo returned.
Stop. Hammer time.
Only played the 5 minutes, but had 1 point and 2 rebounds. He was a guy that was starting to show a little bit, but with Deontay Burton forcing his way into the rotation, Terry Ferguson, Alex Abrines, he's not going to be a viable option in many leagues. For the Nets, Spencer Dinwiddie moved back to the bench, so that shout out to the user on Basketball Monster who suggested this nickname, and I can't believe I didn't go with it. Smokin' Joe Harris was back, 34 minutes for Smokin' Joe, 19-7 with 3 triples and a steal. That's really, really strong, and it might make you try and fall over your own dick in trying to pick him up off the waiver wire. I wouldn't be so quick in doing it, but he is a relatively efficient and consistent source of 3-pointers, but this sort of a line is at the upper end of what he does. Dinwiddie had 17 points with a steal and 2 blocks. Strong from him. He needs to remain on your roster. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, he can go. 12-team leagues, done. I'm done with him. 2, 9, and 6. The 9 and 6 are nice, but 2 points, no defensive numbers. He just doesn't really do anything. He's just not showing anything. While Kenny Atkinson, we've got to get more minutes for Rowdy Rodion's Kuruks. He played exactly 0 minutes, so shout out to him for talking out of his ass. Jarrett Allen, 15, 8, and 4 with a block. Not good percentages, but still a relatively strong game. But I can't ignore the blue swimmer. I shit on this bloke all the time. But when he has a good game, you got to acknowledge it. 22 points included 7 triples, 2 assists and a steal. He is a hit it and hope streamer. Maybe it comes good type of a guy. 14 teams more than 12. While D'Angelo had 17 with 4 assists and 2 steals. On to the next game. We've got the Clippers and the Memphis Grizzlies. A big win for the Grizz, 96-86. Boban Marjanovic out of nowhere. 13 minutes, 19 and 8 for Boban, including an absolutely staggering 11 of 12 from the free throw line. That's 12 free throw attempts in 13 minutes. That is as unsustainable as it gets. He was fantastic in this game, but of course he was a DNP CD last game. We know we're not falling for this in deeper leagues, sure, but even then, is he going to play 1 out of every 3 games? I don't know. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 29 minutes, 12, 4, and 4, 3 steals and a block, back on track after 2 turds. I'll continue to reiterate these. He is a 12-team guy, and if he's on the wire in my league, I'll grab him. Lou Williams, 12 points with 7 assists, while the table, Montrezl Harrell. There's a massive downturn happening with the table at the moment. The positive thing I can say about him here is he didn't take a free throw because he was murdering you in that category, but only 8 points and 3 rebounds in 26 minutes, lost some playing time with Boban playing that well, and over the last 2 weeks, he is the 196th ranked player. 17.5 points, 7 rebounds. The blocks, which had been sky high to start the season, well away from his career numbers, they are coming back to earth. Only 1.1 blocks over his last 7 games. He was at 1.6 for the season, and the free throws down at 48% over that time. Just a huge, huge negative, and those things that were really keeping him buoyant in terms of ranking, they're not happening at the moment. So there is some... Look, you're not dropping Harrell at all, but this is obviously a level of concern with his performance and not being able to keep up that torrid pace to begin this season. We're seeing that we're seeing that drop off with Harrell at the moment. So it is worth paying attention to and seeing where it goes. You might be able to acquire him at a cheaper price, but more likely you might be able to actually sell him off in case it actually continues at this level. So it's worth inquiring on both ways if you do have him and if you don't have him, and seeing if you can make the deal that helps your team out the most. The Rooster, I think someone had a stat that he'd missed 4 free throws all year and then missed 4 free throws in this game. 4 of 8 from the line, just an absolutely bizarre performance. 17 and 5, while Toby Harris shit the bed. 7 and 12 with a 3 in 33 minutes. Just a disaster all round for the Clippers. Avery Bradley, he couldn't string together 4 straight good games, 5 points in 33 minutes. On to the Grizz, 22 and 7 for Mick Conley. He also had the Richie Beno.
2 for 2.
He's been massive this season, while Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr. got into foul trouble. He had a 1-1. He played 21 minutes and had 13 and 6. And that meant, as I talked about yesterday in the DFS portion, is that if Jackson gets into foul trouble, then you throw JaMychal Green into your GPP lineup. Green played 29 minutes. He had 19 and 11. He had 2 steals and was 58% from the field. That's a very impressive performance from JaMychal. He is barely outside the top 100 for this season. He's doing it on 10.5 with 7 rebounds, half a block, 1.2 steals. There are a few things there that are a little bit out of the ordinary for him. This is a guy that over his past 4 seasons had a steal rate of 1.1, 1.1, 0.8 and 0.7 steals. He's at 1.8 this season, so almost double his career steal rate. So there's an element of that coming down. His true shooting is also up at the moment, almost, significantly higher than what it was last season. And in fact, it's 62% over the last 3 games, really, really bumping up for him at the moment and getting that extra playing time when Jackson does get into foul trouble. Now, when Jackson stays out of foul trouble, Green is going to be a hard guy to roster. I think he's a limited upside player who's going to see a regression in steals. You can definitely roster him for now, but there's going to be nights where he plays 21 minutes or 18 minutes. But he's had 4 consecutive strong games, double-digit scoring games, strong performances. 2 of those were positive fantasy ones. 2 of them weren't. But I just don't see it being a consistent thing for Green, and it's all just going to rely upon what Jackson does. Kyle Anderson had 7, 7, and 6 with a steal and a block, and that is as Kyle Anderson as it gets, really. Well, Joakim Noah made his Memphis Grizzlies debut, 13 minutes, and I think the impact that he is going to have is it's going to take a couple of minutes off the top from Marc Gasol. Gasol only played 33 minutes here, and with shithouse, 1 of 13, 4 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists. I don't think that Noah's going to be putting up stat lines for any sort of fantasy league. I don't think he's going to be really dismantling Marc Gasol's value, but he's going to lose. I think he's going to lose a couple of minutes from Gasol, not because Gasol's not good enough, but just so he got someone that he can give him a rest and allow him to actually just not play 36 minutes a night and be more rested for the bigger moments in games. Let's go to the next game. It's a blowout. Dallas and New Orleans. Luka Doncic struggled 8, 4, and 6. The shot wasn't there. Just Drew Holiday absolutely killed him in this game. Dennis Smith was out with that wrist problem again, so Dorian Finney-Smith started, had 12, 5, and 3, but we know he goes back to irrelevancy when everyone's healthy. Well, JJ Barea did his little thing, 14 points, 4 assists, and 2 steals, and Dwight Powell took advantage of DeAndre Jordan's suckitude. 12 and 10 with 2 blocks for Powley. When Dirk returns, when Jordan's not shit, Powell's going to struggle to get anywhere near this level of value, while my man Harrison Barnes had 16 points in 24 minutes, the pencil, 2 rebounds, 1 assist and 1 steal on inefficient shooting, which is, that's a very Harrison Barnes pencil type line. That's just what he does, and I don't believe that he is a top 100 player. Simple as that. On to the Pelicans. Anthony Davis sprained his ankle, came back, and on nearly any other day, this would have been the monstrous line of the night. 27-4 with 9 assists. What? 2 steals and 5 blocks. Now, I probably should look this up, but how many blokes have had 9 assists and 5 blocks in the same game? And he had 4 rebounds as well. Just a strange line. While Drew Holiday's astonishing season continues. 17 with 8 assists, 4 steals on 55% shooting. They did make a change to their starting lineup. Etuan Moore went to the bench and Solomon Hill started, and a lot of the Pelicans guys were positing that perhaps that was because Julius Randle was starting and it just gave an extra bench scorer. So Moore, I don't know if he's going to stick in that bench role. 17, 4, and 6. That's a really nice line from Moore, but I still don't see him as a must-roster 12-teamer. As for Randle, almost predictably, 2 big games in the starting lineup with Mirotic injured. And Gentry's like, we liked how he played in the starting lineup, maybe we have to keep him there. Like, maybe, and it's working. I can see them doing that, but I just don't like the idea of a bloke getting sick and then coming back and changing up the complete rotation with Mirotic. But regardless, all these guys are still valuable. 27 and 18 for Randall. He was a killer here. While my man Cheikh Diallo, 10 and 10 with 3 steals. I really like Diallo. He's just not going to play enough on this team. But give him an opportunity and he'll put up the numbers. While assist stream specialist Timmy Frazier had 7 of them here. 8 points and 6 rebounds, but realistically, he's not helping every team. It's really just going to be an assist, but they can be super valuable. So have a look at him in all leagues and see whether it actually does help your team or not. The Detroit Pistons and the Milwaukee Bucks, the Kyle McEwen Bowl. Blake Griffin, 31 and 7, as the Pistons went down 92-115, while Reggie Jackson, only 24 minutes, had some foul trouble, 15, 7 and 5, strong from him, while the Shark Bruce Brown, 3, 5, and 3. I like Brown long term. I don't think he's going to impact too many fantasy leagues this season. The little dog, Glenn Robinson, played 9 minutes. He's not good at all, and he shouldn't be really rostered in any leagues. While Langston Galloway started for Reggie Bullock and had his second consecutive pile of shit game. 5 points in 23 minutes for Galloway. I'm not sure why Dwayne Casey hates the Duck Luke Kennard, who played only 7 minutes. This is a perfect opportunity for Kennard to play more. And I'd really like to see that happen, but it's just not happening at this point. While Andre Drummond's free throws continue to be an issue, and his field goals, 4 of 10. He's reverting to Stan Van Gundy, Andre Drummond. 10 and 8 with a steal here for Drummond on those low field goal percentage nights. They are a killer, really, for what he does, and he has regressed significantly this season from the start of the year. For the Bucks, a weird situation. Khris Middleton, who was benched in the Bucks, lost to the Knicks. Only played 19 minutes. Didn't play pretty much the entire second half. They said it was like a disciplinary thing based on him making some mistakes on the court. He was just benched. And from everything the Bucks reporter said, it was dealt with. Him and Budenholzer spoke about it. It was fine at practice. And then half an hour before the game, Middleton was ruled out. Not with a team personal. Now that's weird as shit to me. Like that is strange. Now I am not a person, and people do this all the time, and we have to think about this, that anytime someone is out with personal reasons, trade, it's going to be a trade, mate, it's getting traded. How many times have we actually seen that happen? Last year, there was 3 guys who were sent away from their team to be traded, but we knew about it. Eric Bledsoe was told not to play for the Suns, so he could get traded. And he got traded, but we knew about it. Nikola Mirotic, the Bulls, says, don't come to the game, we're going to trade you, and they traded him. The Memphis Grizzlies said to Tyreke Evans, don't come, we're going to trade you. And they didn't trade him because they're idiots. But there was never... What instance has there been of a guy being out for personal reasons and then next minute he's traded? J.R. Smith is not with the team for personal reasons, but we know it's because they're going to trade him. So I'm not leaping to a conclusion here to say that Middleton's getting traded, which everyone seemed to insinuate from my tweet, which isn't what I was saying. But it is still very weird. It's still strange. I've got no idea what's going on. No one knew about this. No Bucks people knew he wasn't even with the team after getting benched in the last game and then being out with a mysterious personal issue about half an hour before the game. There is weird shit here, and I haven't seen anything to explain to me what the actual issue is. I don't think he's getting traded, but it's weird. It's definitely one for us to watch. Antetokounmpo got into foul trouble. The game was also a blowout, so no one played big minutes for the Bucks. 15, 8, and 5 for Yanni, while Bledsoe was fantastic. 27, 3, and 4. 4 steals. There's just so many players who are the absolute identity of please don't panic in the first 3 weeks of the season. He is one of them. Oh my God, he's killed me. Oh, 4th round pick, man. I'm going to get rid of him. Maybe not. Maybe calm down. And this is a lesson you have to teach yourself every single season. That things will right themselves. When a bloke is averaging half his career steal rate, odds are that it's going to revert. When a bloke comes out shooting 20% from 3 as a 40% three-point shooter, it's going to fix. And you got to just be patient here. My mate Tone Snell started in place of Middleton, had 11 and 7 with 2 steals, but he goes back to irrelevance. While the big Ragu, Dante DiVincenzo, didn't play as much as I thought he would in this game. 17 minutes for 3 points. Just wanted to say his name. On to the next game, we have got the Philadelphia 76ers and the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors win 113-102, while Jim Butler, 38 minutes and 38 points, 10 rebounds, 4 threes, a steal and a block. Big game from Jim. His value recently had been really skewed by high steals, but it was good that he was able to put up a high usage, high scoring, high efficiency game to balance that out. Really strong, while Redick had 25 with 5 triples. It wasn't a great game for Embiid, who had 10 points on 17 shots. He says he's struggled the last couple. He looks to be labouring a little bit. Not that he's hurt, but just struggling, going through a stretch. He's a guy that leads the league in minutes at the moment. 10, 12, and 5 with two blocks for him, while Simmons had 8, 10, and 11, and Babyneck had 3, 6, and 2. Surely there's not one person out there who has convinced themselves that he is a 12-team league guy, because he's not. Timothy John McConnell, one of your best steal streamers, another 5 for him in this game in 23 minutes. On to the Raptors, the fun guy.
I'm a fun guy.
Kawhi Leonard was bloody brilliant in this game. 36 and 9 with 5 triples, an assist, 5 steals, and a block. 54% shooting, 83% from the line, just putting up those numbers. And if you were the guys who got him in the second round of drafts or at the back end of drafts, you're pretty bloody pleased. He is the 9th ranked overall guy this season, and he's still got significant room to improve. 6th over the last 2 weeks. He can be a top 5 guy this season, or at least push into that. Jonas Valanciunas had been struggling of late, but this was a sort of performance that's reminiscent of what he did at the start of the season. Only 18 minutes, had foul trouble, but 26 points in 18 minutes. 69% shooting.
Giggity.
Shout out to Jovan Buha of The Athletic, who shouted me out in a giggity tweet today. So shout out to you, Jovan, who I know. Is it Jovan or Jovan? I apologize. I don't actually know how to say your name out loud. I'll have to get you on the podcast one day, but thank you for shouting me out in your giggity tweet. Yeah, that's really big from Valanciunas, who had been struggling of late. He's the 100th ranked player over the course of the season. Probably not a must-roster 10-team league guy, but pretty solid enough. Well, yeah, solid enough for 12-team formats. Ibaka still went well, 18 and 8, while Lowry only had 7 points, but supplemented it with 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, and a block. Well, finally, the shit that I've been saying happened, because I was starting to look like a dickhead, really. I said Pascal Siakam can't continue to shoot 80% from the field. And that's an exaggeration, because he was shooting, I think, 70%, and he just kept doing it. Well, today he didn't. 6, 8, and 6. Still played well with the assist numbers. That's a big surprise, and nice rebounds. But the field goal percentage was always destined to dip, and we've seen it start to dip a little bit over the last couple of games. Well, Dan Green had a pretty quiet 5, 5, and 3 performance. Also, quickly, we had first quarter minutes from Greg Munro.
As Greg runs in, we realise this could get dangerous.
And again, I mainly just played that so you guys could hear the drop. The next game we look at is the Charlotte Hornets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Wolves won 121-104. Imagine thinking that the only way you could win games was by having General Soreness on your team. For the Hornets, is he alive? Nick Batum, 18, 7, and 8 for Batum. 37 minutes for the nut puncher with a steal. I'm one of his staunchest supporters. And when he goes through stretches of slumping, I'm always like, hang with him, it'll come good. And this year I lost faith. I was like, I'm not sure that it's going to come good enough for 10-team leagues. And I'm still not sure, because the assists, the thing that had been keeping him afloat, weren't there. And normally when he goes through a slump, it's because he can't shoot. But he'd been at like 46% from the field, and the assists weren't there. And I thought, shit, what's going on here? But today, this is back to vintage Batum. Low field goal percentage and high assists. A season high in assists, which is interesting. I don't think it's a complete switch in the way they're running things. But if he's in a 12-team wire, I'd grab him and see what happens. Kemba Walker's fading. He's not a top 10 guy anymore. 15, 2, and 5 in 30 minutes. While Jeremy Lamb, he's not fading. He's doing the opposite. 18 and 11 with 2 triples. The shooting was terrible. 6 of 18, but still just goes from strength to strength. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist started, a little bit surprising over Miles Bridges. Now, Borrego did say pre-game he thought it might be a little bit unfair to throw Bridges out there to match up against big, strong, Bad News Brown, Taj Gibson. So maybe we see Miles start the next game. Bridges was okay, 10 points in 21 minutes. I don't see huge upside for Bridges as a long-term prospect this season. He'd have to unseat Williams or Batum or Kidd-Gilchrist to find himself in a solid 30-minute a night role, and I don't see him doing that. I do like him, decently enough long-term. I just don't see that upside. But for short-term, I thought he was a decent ad, and he still probably is with Marvin Williams. That just didn't go to plan today. On the Timberwolves, Bob Cove, 17 and 6 with 2 steals and a block. Well, Jeff Teague.
My name is Jeff.
Just, you look at it, you get 3 points, 1 of 6 shooting, shithouse. But 18 assists, a career high, 1 steal and 2 blocks, helped you out in those other areas. While Andrew Wiggins, 26 points, 6 rebounds and 5 assists, 3 triples and a block. And this is what makes us get turgid about Wiggins. We go, man, he can do these things. He can do some of this stuff. It just happens 1 out of 15 games. And he'd been dreadful before this performance. But this is a spark. If you're still holding, you are still holding on. And you should be still holding in. But I wouldn't be expecting this continually. A nice 25-minute double-double for Taj Gibson, Bad News Brown. 11 and 10 there. While Derrick Rose, this is a very Knicks Derrick Rose line. 16 points with no threes, 1 rebound, 3 assists, and no other stats. Shot the ball well, again, which I think is going to come down. But we're starting to see that Derrick Rose, who was unbelievably a top 20 guy for big stretches this season, falling off. And I think we're nowhere near it, but I think we're going to see Rose fall out of 12-team contention at some point this season. That's my prediction. The last game of the night, the San Antonio Spurs and the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers beat the Spurs on a back-to-back, 121-113. The Spurs were on that back-to-back. Rudy Gay, who was dreadful yesterday, I think he was the dud of the night. I actually didn't have a high roster percentage on Yahoo. 31-7, 2 threes and 2 steals. His best performance as a member of the Spurs. He's going to be inconsistent. When he's playing 30 minutes, he's a clear top 100 guy, but we just don't have the confidence that continues to happen. While LaMarcus Aldridge had 21-9 and 32-7 for DeMar DeRozan, I think you're still looking at Gay as a 12-team league guy. They made another change to the starting lineup with Dante Cunningham replacing Davis Bertans. He had 2 and 8 Cunningham, while Derek White, another drop off, 2, 4 and 5, still just someone to watch, while Bryn Forbes had 2 points in 21 minutes. I think we are all starting to realize that Forbes just isn't that good. He's not a point guard, and he's not an NBA caliber starter. On to the Lakers.
LeBron James.
He absolutely took over at the end of this game. 42, 5 and 6 with 2 steals on 63% shooting. Unfortunately, from the line,
Giggity.
69%. Lonzo Ball we talked about already, while the future MVP Kyle Kuzma played 39 minutes. Really elevated performance with Brandon Ingram out. 22, 9 and 5 for Kuzma, and he will see a lot more playing time with Ingram sidelined. It's hard to get a full read of the rotation because Josh the Hitman Hart would have absorbed so many of Ingram's minutes, but he had 4 fouls in like 4 minutes. Ended up with 13 minutes, 6 points and 2 triples. And if Ingram is out, Hart can have back-end 12-team league value as long as Ingram is sidelined. JaVale McGee, only 19 minutes. Foul trouble limited him, 8 and 4 with a block, while Tyson Chandler, he of the best net rating of the day, 2 and 9 in 28 minutes. So Chandler is impacting McGee. McGee's still a rostered player, no problem about that, but he's not that guy who was getting 32 minutes a night in one of the biggest surprises of the early part of the season. Not much else to really talk about there with the Lakers. Actually, no, it's not true, because Kentavious Caldwell-Pope had 12 points in his 28 minutes. A decent enough performance from old KCP over there. All right, let's get in now and talk some DFS action. We've got the perfect DFS lineup over on DraftKings. Jamal Murray, the Blue Arrow, Evan Fournier, Nick Batum, JaMychal Green, Karl-Anthony Towns, Kent Bazemore, Paul George, and General Soreness, Jimmy Butler, for a total of 430.25, and that cost the $50,000. Whereas on FanDuel, it was Steph, it was Satoransky, Brad Beal, Kent Bazemore, Paul George, Rudy Gay, JaMychal Green, Shek Diallo, and Karl-Anthony Towns for a total of 469.2, and that cost $59,100. All right, the first game for Thursday, we're looking at the New York Knicks taking on the Boston Celtics. Going to be looking at DraftKings pricing mainly for today's games. The Celtics are favored by 13 points, and the total is 216.5. The Knicks, of course, won the last meeting against the Boston Celtics. We're going to have, likely Jaylen Brown back in action, but what they do with that starting lineup in Boston remains to be seen. Will it be Marcus Smart that remains starting? That's what I think they will do, and then that will leave Jaylen and Gordon Hayward to run that second unit, while Marcus Morris and Marcus Smart take up the positions in the starting lineup. There's significant blowout risk in this game and the second game, so they could be a little bit risky for cash games, but with only a 3-game slate in general, I'd say this is an entire slate to fade if possible. Not if possible, because you can do it, but that's the way I'd be looking at it with these two real blowouts there, and maybe just throwing 1 or 2 GPP lineups out there. At the point guard position, Smart is at 4,400 over on DraftKings. His production has been okay, but with Brown coming back, I think that takes a bit of the edge away there, while Emmanuel Mudiay has been putting up strong numbers. He is up to 5,700. That's a $700 price rise over on DraftKings, so I guess that's a little bit of a concern about him making that number. Even in the strong games he's had, only 29 points last game. It probably does make him a tougher guy to use, but again, we're talking about a limited slate, so he does have to be, I guess, in some part of the discussion, while Kyrie Irving at $9,000. He averages 49 points against the Knicks the last 3 times out. Again, I think it's probably a little bit too much. I'd rather take someone like a Damian Lillard or even a Rick Rubio at the point guard position rather than Kyrie Irving in this scenario. For the Knicks, Alonzo Trier is there as well. His numbers have dropped way off. While Terry Rozier, I guess there's some garbage time potential for Rozier at 4,100, so maybe in a GPP, that's about it. I like Timmy Hardaway as a shooting guard at 6,600, and I like Gordie Hayward at 6,100. Hayward exploded for 58 points last time out easily. His best performance for the season. Big numbers from Gordo in that game. And then you've got Damo Dotson, who's been super strong. He's up to 4,800. He's averaging 32 over the last 3. It's coming on really hot shooting, so there is an element of risk with Dotto there because he doesn't do huge amounts, although he did have 10 rebounds in the last game. So I don't completely hate using him. I think there are better options over on DraftKings as opposed to some of the other sites, though. Other wing players, we're looking at Jace Tatum's at 7,100, maybe a little bit high for Tatum in the blowout situation, while Mario Hezonja at 3,200. Hezonja is actually averaging 18 points over the last 3, but I have no trust in what Fizdale's going to do in terms of playing time. I'd much rather take the 4,500 on the Fort, Kevin Knox, who is averaging 30 over his last 3. Struggled a little bit last game, but still had 26 points, which at 4,500 is absolutely worth looking at. Then you got the big man, actually Marcus Morris, I love at 5,300. Really strong value for Morris. Should be a 25-point floor pretty comfortably. The big man, Al Horford at 6,200. He has done very well against the Knicks in the past, so another opportunity for him to go for 35 plus here. He averages 36 the last 3 times against New York. You got Vonleh at 5,100, who is steady, but I don't think it's enough at 5,100, and Enes Kanter at 6,800. You just never know what's going to happen. A good tournament play, but is he a 36-minute guy? Is he a 22-minute guy? Fizdale could be all over the place with his minutes, and Mitchell Robinson at 3,200. Always a sneaky GPP guy because he can come in and have 6 blocks and bring the value back just on his blocks alone. Of course, he could foul out in 10 minutes, and that limits any sort of reliability you could have with Mitchell Robinson for DFS. On FanDuel, this is the game I really like. In terms of the pricing, the blowout is still the risk, though. I like Hayward, Horford, Hardaway, Morris, Vonleh, and Tatum. I think they're all relatively solidly priced. Moutier and Irving as well. Again, given the relative prices of some of the other guys on FanDuel, but there is still that risk, of course, with these players in terms of blowouts. Yeah, the blowout proof type of guys, I think Morris and Hayward at their pricing are relatively blowout proof guys, and the 5,700 from Emmanuel Moutier, I think that's decently solid. Yeah, decently solid over there with the old FanDuel for this game. The next game we take a look at, we've got the Phoenix Suns and the Portland Trailblazers. There was no spread for this game, but recently it has come out. So we've got the Blazers favored by 14, and the total is 216.5. Another real blowout scenario. No TJ Warren, no Devin Booker for the Phoenix Suns. Their lineup remains to be seen. Will it be DeAnthony Melton? Will it be Elie Okobo? I think we're going to have Josh Jackson, Trevor Ariza, and McCall Bridges starting. And then it's just going to be what happens at that point guard position. So, DeAnthony Melton at 4,200 and Elie Okobo at 4,000. That's a huge rise from Melton, who jumped $1,200 from last game. He had 34 points in basically a half of starting. So I think he's worth looking at, but we just don't know. Now, if we hear that he's starting, then I do like him for cash. If we hear that he's coming off the bench, I'd look at him more as tournament guys. Okobo is just a GPP guy, pretty much regardless of where he plays, whereas Lillard at 10-1, it's expensive on DraftKings, but given the lack of high-end players on this slate, he is a good option to go with and then take some of those other cheaper guys around him. CJ McCollum at 7,400 also does well against Phoenix. A good opportunity for him to have a 40-pointer. I like him in both formats of the game. Seth Curry, Jamal Crawford, nothing to see with those guys. Evan Turner at 4,200. I think a relatively safe floor for Turner. He's giving you 25 a night at the moment, which at 4,200 is a pretty good return. And then McCall Bridges at 4,100. If the defense comes like it did last game, where he put up 25 points, that's a good return at 4,100, and he did that without hitting shots. So if you can combine those two things together, a 35-point performance isn't too far from a possibility for Bridges, but really just a GPP sort of a guy. The other wing guys we look at, Mo Harkless, I don't really have too much trust in him at all. The Chief, Al-Farouq Aminu. Would be better if I plugged that one in, I think.
Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit.
That's better. He is always a GPP option on a real hot streak, averaging 35 over the last 3. Of course, we know with the Chief that it's unlikely to stick, so he's a guy that you can pay some attention to. Well, Josh Jackson at 5,400, also a pretty strong cash player with those absences of Booker and Warren for the Suns. Trevor Ariza also safe, I think, at 5,600. Onto the big men side of things, I do love Yusuf Nurkic here, 7,300. We know that going up against the Suns is almost as good as going up against the Nets or the Knicks or the Bulls. They are the 4 teams that really do, have a lot of value in terms of big men going up against them. So even though there is the blowout risk with Nurkic, I do like him quite a bit in this one at 7,300 on DraftKings. Zach Collins at 34, maybe a GPP guy in case it is a blowout and he gets extra run, while DeAndre Ayton is struggling, averaging only 29 points over the last 5 at 6,700. Blazers have allowed some decent numbers against centers, but I'm not really buying into Ayton at this point. I'd much rather take the 4,300 for Rashawn Holmes, who's averaging 25 over his last 5, and in blowouts, he's getting extra minutes, and that's what we could be seeing here. So I do like Holmesy in this matchup against the Portland Trailblazers. On the FanDuel side of things, I'm looking at Nurkic and Evan Turner, Lillard and Joshy Jackson as pretty strong plays. Rashawn Holmes at 5,100 may be a little bit elevated over on FanDuel, whereas Melton and Bridges still more of those tournament guys. But that 4,500 for DeAnthony Melton is obviously really appealing, especially if we get the news that he is going to be starting at point guard. The last game of the night is the Houston Rockets and the Utah Jazz. The Jazz are 3.5-point favorites. The total is 217.5, and this is a playoff matchup from last season. The line actually has shifted quite a bit since just a couple of hours ago. The Jazz are now favored by only 2. So that's it's a big change to come in that quickly in that short of an amount of time. So that is worth mentioning. At point guard, ravishing Rick Rubio. He's averaging 34 over the last 3 at 6,400, a limited slate. I like him. I like the Donovan Mitchell at 76 and Chris Paul at 77, who is in a little bit of a dip in form. Only 23 points last game for Chris, but he averages 50 against the Jazz the last 3 times out. So I think that's a good bounce back scenario. And of course, Jim Harden under 11,000, well, actually impossible to ignore at that $10,800 price tag. For your shooting guards, Jingling Joe's at 5,500, a strong game from him last time. That's not a high salary bar for him to be able to clear, so I do like Ingles. Jim Ennis, Eric Gordon, not really doing it for me, nor is PJ Tucker or Kyle Korver. Jay Crowder's at 49. He moved back to the bench last game. I could see this being one where he does move back to the starting lineup, and then I would consider him a GPP option, but we don't have confirmation of that at this point. While the Comet, Gary Clark, should be back in the rotation for the Rockets, with Daniel House being waived. He's a minimum salary guy who's not really doing a huge amount, so I don't think you need to worry too much about him. For the big man, Derek Favors at 4,600. I think this could be a tough matchup for Favors, so I'm not sure that I'm going to be looking at him too intently in this one, while Clint Capella and Rudy Gobert, 8,000 and 8,300. I think they are both cash options. If I had to take one, it would be Capella, just because I'm saving that extra cash. Over on FanDuel, I like Favors as a cash play at 5,100. Rubio, Ingles, Harden, Capella, they all have value, as does the Don at 8,500. All right, let's go into the studs and value plays across the sites. On DraftKings, my stud is Harden at 10.8, and my value is Nurkic at 7,300. On FanDuel, Nurkic at 85 is my stud, and my value is DeAnthony Melton at 4,500. Of course, that risk that we talked about already. On Yahoo, my stud is Gobert at $35, and my value is minimum salary Damo Dotson. And on DraftStars, I'm looking at Damian Lillard as my start, 18,130, and the value play of Yusuf Nurkic at 13,110. That'll wrap it up for today's show, guys. Go and subscribe to this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, or on YouTube, where you can leave a comment, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe, of course, so you never miss an episode. Check out our sponsor today, Action Heat. actionheat.com/lockedon, and of course the Locked On Podcast Network on Twitter and Instagram at LockedOnNBANet. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Bobby Portis.